Welcome to Tone Talk. How's everybody doing today? This is Antonio Moore coming to you from Tone Talks. I wanted to come to you on this 4th of July and have a brief discussion about a new article that came out on CNN entitled Black Men Are Succeeding in America. And just to tell you, I see major problems with the article. You know, I feel like we gotta always be clear about who made it, what is it about, and whether it's actually accurate. None of that seems to be true here. And so, you know, I look at this thing and it's made by the American Enterprise Institute. American Enterprise Institute is a conservative think tank. That conservative think tank is supported by Cheney and Bush. You know, and for a conservative think tank to put forth propaganda that says that black men are doing well today, given the incarceration, the wealth data, given everything that we know about African American males and their condition, it's just highly problematic. You know, when I look at this article, Black Men Are Succeeding in America, the title doesn't go with the study. And the study isn't altogether accurate at all. It's highly problematic to look at income over wealth. We know that. When we look at wealth, middle black family in this country is worth $1,700. So you know that when you look at income, you already have a flaw, because African American men are one of the most incarcerated in the history of the modern world. When we look at most groups, incarceration rates are at 0.1% for like black women and white women, 1% for white men. It's at 10%, something we've never seen before. Highest that we've seen in the modern world was during apartheid in South Africa. I think it was like 0.8%. So to have a group that's 10% incarcerated, employment numbers were never built for that. They were never built to deal with that reality. And so when I look at this thing, we know that they're living out incarceration. It's important to note that CNN Money did an article in 2016, or I should say early 2017. 1 in 5 African American men didn't work at all in all of 2016. Do we understand the context of that? Do we understand the reality of what that means? Not only for this flawed data set, but also for the reality of how black men are largely not part of the general fabric of American daily society. So, you know, the last thing that I'll say is that, you know, we have no notation of how many hours it takes to make the income that they're saying. So when we use these annual numbers, we're looking at numbers in the 60s where people largely worked 40 hours a week and went home. Unionization, all kind of employment protections that were on the rise. Whereas now we're talking about people who Uber at night, who Lyft at night, who do odd jobs. So we might be talking about somebody working 60 or 70 hours and comparing them to somebody that works 40. You know, New York Times actually did 2 pieces that I like to bring in context of this. And one is that, you know, you had the Chetty study. We talked about that. I did a video on that. And what I talked about in that video was this study that they did, the Chetty study, showed that black men have a severe, unique, punishing cost that no other group has, including African American females, where even if they're born into some level of higher income families, what you find is that unlike their white male counterparts, they fall out. They don't achieve higher incomes in their adulthood, these African American men. In addition, you look over at another finding. The New York Times did a piece, The Upshot, where it showed that 1.5 million African American men are missing from the population. So for every 100 African American women, there's only 83 black men due to death and incarceration. We're talking about like third world missing numbers. So to have an article from CNN that so irresponsibly titles itself, Black Men Are Succeeding in America, in the midst of this, we got to question why. We got to look at the authors and the creators, as I said earlier. So the author itself is these 3, it looks like sociologists. They don't look like economists. You got Bradford Wilcox, an older white man. You got Wendy Wang, an Asian woman. And you got this older black man, Ronald Mincy. You know, we did a study earlier this year, myself, Sandy Darity, Dark Hamilton, Ann Price, Alan Asia, Miss Chiopris, Mark Paul, so many of us, a mixed and diverse group, to bring to you what we get wrong about closing the racial wealth gap. These are a mix of economists that work at this at a high level. To have these people not really understanding the implication of timing or income versus wealth, all at the bequest of the AEI, this conservative think tank, It just has to make us wonder how could and why would CNN put this up? Why would CNN put this up? They put it up as an opinion piece, I guess maybe to protect themselves somewhat. This wasn't put up as a regular article, but the opinion is unfounded. And so, but they didn't expect Tone Talks to be here. So now I'm gonna get into the data of the study. There's two metrics I'm gonna focus on, but there's plenty others that I feel show that this study is summarily flawed. The first being that they look at the poverty line to measure black male progress. The poverty line is a severe issue as a metric measuring from year to year, and I'll explain to you why in a second. To not know that is a problem. The second, just as important, is that they focus on the youngest boomers. The youngest boomers experienced one of the greatest economic upticks for African Americans ever experienced for any African Americans in the history of America. I'm gonna explain to you with data what I mean so you can be clear. You can't just look at the youngest boomers at different stages of their life to measure how black men are doing today. It doesn't make any sense. So let me look at the first thing. The first thing they do is they look at poverty, and the study uses a share in poverty among men by race and ethnicity. From 1960 to 2016, the share of black men who are poor has fallen from 41% in 1960 to 18% in 2016. This is what they say. Now, this is the issue, is that the poverty line isn't accurate. It's specifically not accurate as a metric from year to year. The Nation did a great article. I'm pulling it up now. The federal poverty line is too damn low. I'm going to share a section with you and it'll make it clearer for you. The U.S. Census Bureau's announcement today that the number of Americans living below the poverty line fell between 2014 and 15 is good news. But before we get too excited, it is worth noting that the federal poverty line was a meager $12,000 for a single person living alone in 2015 and about $24,000 for a married couple living with 2 children. The main reason I don't trust this approach, this is according to the author, to measuring poverty is shown in the figure below. I'll pull that up for you guys. In 1963, the poverty line for a family of 4 was 50% below the median family income, or a half of the income of the typical 4-person family in America. Today, however, the poverty line for a family of 4 is nearly 75% below the median family income. So it's artificially set. It's artificially low. So of course a lot of people are going to be above the artificially low number. Of course a lot more people are going to be below the artificially low number. Look at the chart that I'm showing you. The dotted line is where it should be, the poverty line. The red line is where it's at. It makes no sense that this poverty line is at that level. The line where it's at is too low. So of course you have a bunch of black men above that line, especially when you leave out the prisoners, the underemployed, the no longer surveying. This is just, let me continue on with the article. When the federal government started using her calculation of the poverty line in the mid-60s, Orshansky and the federal officials understood that it would need to be adjusted over the long term for increases in mainstream living standards. The SSA made a tentative decision early in 1968 to adjust the poverty thresholds for the higher general standard of living. But this is what happened. But then 2 things happened. First, officials in the Johnson administration prohibited the SSA from making this kind of standard of living adjustment, likely in part due to concern that the updated figures would show an increase in poverty. Secondly, Richard Nixon was elected president. After he took office, his budget office issued a directive making it so that we didn't adjust the standard of living thresholds. We just kind of adjusted minorly for inflation. So this doesn't make any sense to try to look at black men above the poverty line, which is like not a standard of living that anyone could survive on in America, to say that black men are doing well. So that's one of the guts of their study. What does that mean for the assertion that black men are flourishing? It means it's wrong. The part is that they looked at a group of the youngest boomers to analyze and critique how black men are doing today. A group that lived among the greatest economic shifts in their favor. Post-affirmative action, America is still booming. The wealth share for the bottom is still high. To assess how black men are doing today when wealth classification is at its height since the Depression. Let's pull up the Diallo chart. I don't play. Come on. Look at this chart. The last time the bottom 90% had the same wealth as the top 0.1 was the Depression. Our whole group is in the bottom 90. To be in the top of the bottom 90, you need to be worth $1 million. $1 million just about as a family. The middle of the bottom 90 is $100,000 in worth. Come on. We in the crust of the bottom 90. You got to understand that the wealth share, like I said in the last video that I did for my show, allowed for this black group of men to go to work as factory workers, buy homes, their wife to stay at home, to take part in the American dream. Read The Color of Law. It led to a fact that there was so much work that there was extra work for black folks to do. Because we can't do the main work, we gotta wait till all the white people get jobs and then we can get the extra jobs. That's what was going on. Lyndon Johnson was making sure there were government contracts as a result of affirmative action, as a result of giving us the Voting Rights Act so we can actually elect our own candidates. Come on. We talking about people that lived amongst the greatest booms in black history. The group that is described by them, that group is born between 1957 and 1964. Again, that group is born between 1957 and 1964. You can't measure them based on different stages of their lives. This is men between the ages of 54 and 61 as I got it. What does that have to do with it today? That's a group that en masse maybe missed mass incarceration. That's a group that en masse had great employment rates comparatively. That's a group that experienced cheap homes all across the country and the rise that goes along with it. Now, did they mimic white wealth? No, not at all. But they didn't mimic the amount of struggle that you see today with millennial African American men, literally shut out from all opportunity. So to have CNN put out an article about how black men are doing today and use boomer men as the basis for that analysis, it's not only flawed, it's not only dangerous, but it's wrong in every way. I believe that CNN needs to retract this article. I believe that we need to demand better from CNN. I believe that we gotta get out there and push the narrative. That's why I think that you should tweet this video to the opinions editor at CNN that allowed this article to be published. This article titled, Black Men Are Succeeding in America. It should have been titled, Oh, Black Men Succeeding in America. Let me tell you why. That's what it should have been titled. Oh, Black Men Are Succeeding in America. Let me tell you why they did it. You need to tweet this to @RichNY. @RichNY. This is a guy named Richard Gallant who is the opinions editor at CNN. He's the guy that actually probably approved this thing. And I just think that we gotta tweet him. We gotta also let's email CNN the same video, and that email is cnn.feedback@cnn.com, cnn.feedback@cnn.com. Let's get out there and push this thing, man. Because this was, I just don't even know how they put this up. Because what happens is people read this and they don't want to do politics because black people are doing okay. You can have Trump read this and think black men are doing all right. A man who we need to understand that we need policy. We need you to get back and stop trying to change everything that undergirds our lives. We're not okay right now. You know, the last thing that I saw in this article that's really problematic as a side note is this pretext that marriage will fix it all for black folk. That somehow married black men do better than poor black men. No, more married black men come from slightly probably higher incomes than poor black men. No, married black men come from better families slightly probably than poor black men. In the end, we're talking about married black men that are young boomers. So everything was a result of what I showed you in the Diallo chart, not marriage itself. Do we understand that marriage is a reflection of stability? It doesn't create it. It's a reflection of the familial stability that was stripped from African American DOS, from American DOS. Multiple family lines of professions and ownership of property that was lost in the color of law. Pick up the book. The inability to bank and be part of communities that was lost with the color of money. Pick up the book. We got to understand that America as a country has never been really for us. And we got to do politics to make sure that they understand that going forward. Please tune in, subscribe at tonetalks.org, donate, share this video. Ourselves, Sandy Darity, Ann Price, and several other economists did a great study. Please review that study about the 10 myths to close the racial wealth gap. You know, what we described is everything that is mythology around how you attack the realities of what has happened to American DOS, African Americans here in this country. So much mythology has been pushed. One of those myths they seem to be adding in this study that we're talking about right now is that black men are doing well already. And none of that is the case. Please pick up our study. It's available online. Stay tuned after this video. I'm going to do a short animated clip that will give you direction how to find the video. Thank you so much for your time today, and happy 4th of July. The Duke Samuel Du Bois Cook Center on Social Equity, an Insight Center for Community Economic Development, bring to you what we get wrong about closing the racial wealth gap. Myth 1. Greater educational attainment or employment rates on the part of blacks will close the racial wealth disparity. We can't outrun this with diplomas. Myth 2. The racial home ownership gap is the driver of the racial wealth gap. We can't expect real estate to be our escape from historical wealth inequality. Myth 3. Banking black and buying black close the racial wealth gap. We can't use black dollars to spend our way out of the racial wealth gap. Myth 4. Black people saving more will close the racial wealth gap. Myth 5. Greater rates of financial literacy will close the racial wealth gap. Myth 6. Entrepreneurship will close the racial wealth gap. Myth 7. Emulating so-called successful minorities will close the racial wealth gap. Myth 8. Improved soft skills will close the racial wealth gap. Myth 9. The growing number of black celebrities prove that the racial wealth gap is closing. Myth 10. Black family disorganization is the cause of the racial wealth gap. None of the mythology that pushes narratives that black Americans are their own worst enemy will close the racial wealth gap. Instead, we need policy that is transformative in imagination, such as racial reparations, baby bonds, or a federal jobs guarantee. Learn more by reading the full report today.